Hey guys, it's Anjali from Doodle Quilting Studio, and I am here tonight just to chat with you for a few minutes about this blog series that I'm starting. I get so many questions working at Seems Like Home. That's where my machine is. That's where I do most of my quilting. Actually, that's where I do all my quilting. But I get so many questions from people, even from our staff working there, like how do I help people choose a long arm quilter? Um, and so much of it depends on what kind of quilting you're looking for and really a whole series of things. So we're going to spend some time in a couple different sessions talking about what things would help you choose your long arm quilter. So tonight we're just going to talk about um, kind of the topics that we'll cover, I guess kind of an introduction, and then really talking about what is a long arm quilter, what do long arm quilters do, how is it different than what you're doing already on your home machine, and kind of where's that tipping point of when you decide, okay, I need a long arm quilter, whether that's you don't like the quilting part at all and you don't want to do any of it, or like that threshold of how much quilt can I really get into my domestic machine. So we're going to chat about all of that. So again, the series is going to go through tonight what a long arm quilter does, and then we're going to talk about next week. We'll talk about what kind of quilting options do you have with a long arm quilter. Now, some of that's going to depend on the person, the long arm, the long armor you choose, and what kind of quilting they offer, things like that. But we'll talk about different options. What are even the basic options that a quilter would be able to offer you. And then we will talk about what do long armors charge. And again, some of that depends on the area, but there's a couple different ways that long armors charge. So we'll talk about those two different ways too. And then what do you need to bring to your long arm quilter? What are they looking for? Most of the time they will tell you exactly what they want you to bring, but just some, good basics to make sure you have ready when you're at the stage of, okay, I have this quilt top done. I'm ready for somebody to quilt it. What do I need to have ready when I take it to that person? And then as we go through the series, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, feel free to shoot me an email, post a message on Facebook or comment on the blog post, wherever is easiest for you. Just let me know if you have any questions and I'll do my best to answer them. So let's jump right into it. What is a long arm quilter? Now, most people, if you're doing quilting for yourself, you're doing it on your sit-down sewing machine. So just your domestic sewing machine where you are, making your quilt sandwich and you're trying to get that quilt, whatever size it is, into the arm of your machine. So the big difference there is a long armor has a really big frame, and I mean they range depending on the brands from a small frame like 5 feet to like the frame that I have is 13 feet long. So they have this big frame and they have this basically it's just a simple machine. It's a straight stitch machine. Long arms don't have feed dogs, so like on our home sewing machine when we're piecing and the fabric is being fed in through the machine, we have feed dogs that are pulling that fabric through. Now a long arm, because it's only doing a straight stitch and you're only doing free motion, there are no feed dogs on it. So a lot of times it's going to be a machine that's going to take up a large footprint of space. So most of you know I do all my quilting at Seems Like Home because right now I don't have a space at home to put it. So hopefully that will be coming. We'll be building a house next summer, and I have a giant long arm studio designed into that house. But for now, I am quilting at Seems Like Home because if you've been in there and seen my machine, it's rather large. It takes up quite a large footprint. So that's the type of machine that a long armor is working on. So when we talk later about preparing your backing and your top and things like that for your long arm quilter, it will make more sense as to why a lot of times quilters ask for, between 3 to 4 extra inches of extra backing fabric, because they're loading that onto that big machine. So why would you use a long arm quilter? Well, really, like I said before, that tipping point. Okay, so you have this quilt, and for a baby quilt, even up to like a twin size, a double, depending on how willing you are to make that work on your home machine, you can quilt all of that, on your sit down machine, just again, depends on how willing you are to work all of that bulk of that quilt into your domestic machine. So for me, there's that tipping point of like maybe a twin size, um, maybe a lap. Of course, it just depends on the dimensions of the quilt on where I would cross over from my home machine to the long arm machine. Um, and where you might decide, okay, this quilt's just too big, or I want this certain type of design on this quilt. So now that's the point where you're going to transition to, okay, I'm not going to quilt this myself. I'm going to take this to a long arm quilter who has that extra space in which to actually, execute a design that's a little bit larger, or more specific about what you're looking for. So how do you choose a long arm quilter? What questions do you ask them? And so this is one that we get a lot at the shop. And if you come by the shop, we do have a nice display of samples from other local quilters. And so you can kind of see what types of quilting they're doing. But as far as questions you need to ask, I think there's a few kind of basic questions. The first one is, what kind of quilting do they offer? Because there are some long arm quilters who only offer edge to edge, meaning the same design goes from one side of the quilt to the other. Or they only offer a pantograph service, which is, it's kind of like a mix between free motion and computerized, because what they're doing is they're following a printed diagram of a design. So you're going to get more, this more uniform looking design. So if you see something that's more symmetrical, or it's like perfectly even on both sides, and some long armors are really good at that, but most of the time that's going to be something that's either done pantograph, or the other option is computerized. So that is where the long armor's loading the quilt, they're selecting a design in a some sort of quilting software, and then they're starting the machine, and the machine is running across the quilt and stitching that design. So it's run by a computer. So that's where you'll see those like perfectly perfect circles and perfectly symmetrical feathers and things like that. That's where you're going to see those types of designs. And I definitely believe that those designs have a place. I mean, you can get some absolutely stunning quilting with some of those computerized machines. So again, that's really the biggest one, is what kind of quilting are you looking for? What kind of quilting do they do? Because if you go to someone, for instance, like the type of quilting that I do, I prefer custom quilting. So, and all of my quilting is hand guided. So I prefer to take the quilt and, I look at it and I think, well, what would look nice here? Of course, that's something that I ask my clients, is if they have an idea of what kind of quilting are they looking for. And if they have any ideas, how can we work that into the quilt? But when you're doing something like more custom quilting, you're looking at a little bit more intricate of design. So when people come to me and they say, oh, I just want an edge to edge. Now, I will sometimes do it, but I prefer the more custom work. And so that's just more interesting for me. So a lot of times I will suggest that, if someone's looking for, based on price, a lot of time the edge to edge is actually, it's a cheaper option than custom. Obviously, it's less work. It's more straightforward. So there are definitely other quilters out there that can do edge to edge for less than what I charge. And so sometimes if that's what they're looking for based on price, if you're looking for quilting just based on price, then every single time computerized or just simple edge to edge is going to be cheaper than custom or ruler work or those more intricate types of quilting. So that's definitely a question I would say make sure you ask, is what kind of quilting do they offer, or even if they have a preference, because some places, like for instance, Doodle, I offer edge to edge up to custom. So the whole range, again, like I said though, I prefer to do the custom quilting. And so that might be something that you ask, is if they have a preference. If they're offering the whole range, do they have a preference? And if their preference isn't what you're looking for, then maybe you find a quilter whose preference is what you're looking for. For one, that they're going to enjoy it more. They're going to have more fun. So they may take, not a little more care, because I think that as quilters in general, we don't want things to be beautiful when they're done. But a quilter that has the preference of what you're looking for, I would say is going to be a better option for you. you're going to be on the same page with them more than somebody who prefers to do something else. And then probably, how do you know if they're any good? So that's something where I would say always ask for examples of their work. If they have a website, then they most likely have a portfolio. So if you can go on their website and look through the samples that they have, quilts they've already done, anything they have showcasing work that they have done, that's definitely a great option. If you're unsure, no, we all start somewhere, right? So if you have a quilter that's just starting out, maybe they don't have quite as many samples as other quilters, but that doesn't mean that they aren't a great quilter. It just means that, they don't have quite as many client quilts built up as some other people. Look at, if you've heard Angela Walter's story with Tula Pink, that was just one of those like right place, right time, serendipitous kind of moments. And so, Tula got an amazing quilter and Angela got an amazing opportunity to quilt for Tula, who makes beautiful, gorgeous fabric and all sorts of great stuff. So sometimes you can find that happy relationship just by chance, just by being that first person that quilter takes on as a client. I know I absolutely adore the first gal that I ever quilted for. She trusted me with a quilt for her brand new grandson, and so it was special for me because I got to be part of, a little bit part of that experience, and special for her because I was able to get her the quilt back before the baby was born, so she had it ready when he showed up. So definitely don't be afraid to take a chance on if you're talking to a newer to the business quilter. They probably have a decent amount of experience. I know most of us try and get as much practice as we can before we put ourselves out there, and putting yourself out there is a little scary. But don't be afraid to ask questions. Any questions that you have, ask the person that you're talking to see pictures, to, be open with you about what they like to do. And don't be afraid, if I always tell people, I'm upfront with my price. So if you are talking to them and the price is too much, or you're unsure, don't be afraid to speak up. And I've had a couple of people that have just said, oh, that's just too much. I'm just not willing to pay that much. And that's totally fine. And I think any quilter, either they'll be able to offer you cheaper options, maybe instead of doing custom, we do edge to edge or something like that. Or just, feel free to look somewhere else. Now, again, good quality quilting is going to cost you more. But don't be afraid to be sure about what you want. If you have an idea, to speak up about it. Now, again, a part of taking your quilt to a long armor is trusting some of their judgment. And so that's something that I try to be very open with people is if I really think that, maybe they're requesting a certain thread color and I just think, ooh, I don't think that you're going to like how that's going to look when it's done. I try to be really upfront about that, and then try to work with that person to choose something that I think they'll still like, that will still look good, and keep everybody kind of happy. So let's see. So I think that's kind of it. If you guys think of any questions, or you're like, hey, what else should I ask, or what, is this an okay question or whatever, just let me know. Shoot me an email, leave me a comment, let me know, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. And otherwise, I'll see you back here next week, and we're going to talk about the types of quilting options. So we'll dig in a little bit more about what those, pantograph, computerized, custom, etc. We'll talk about a little bit about batting and thread and things like that. So hopefully I'll see you guys back here next week. I am going to head to bed. The kiddos are all asleep, so now it's my turn. So I will talk to you guys next week. Bye.